Welcome back, guys. So I don't know if you know this, but somewhat recently when this video is going out, Retroid randomly announced two new handhelds. Yay! They announced the Retroid Pocket Mini and the Retroid Pocket 5. They both went on sale at the exact same time, and I've already pre-ordered both of them. There was absolutely no lead up to this announcement though. They just randomly dropped the teaser for the first one on their YouTube channel, which was like, hey, please give me a bit of a warning next time. But like I said earlier, the first device that they announced in the teaser that I just spoke about is the Retroid Pocket Mini, which is very clearly the next step in the natural progression of their mini devices, their small devices that started with the 2 and 2S. I am kind of sad they're not updating the 2 line anymore. There were like 25 other amazing letters you could have put after 2. Like, aren't 2K and 2X amazing naming schemes? No? They're stupid? Okay, let's move on. All right, scratch all of that. The Retroid Twitter account said that this is not a Pocket 2 refresh, so I guess that throws my theory out, but I think it's still gonna be taking over from the 2 models, at least stopping any future 2 models from being put into production, seeing as they compared the Mini to the 2S in a size comparison sheet, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Then they randomly dropped a teaser for the Pocket 5 in the middle of the Mini's hype cycle and in the middle of me writing this video, which threw me all the way off and caused this video to come out a week later than I wanted it to. But it's fine. For now, at least. Like my video talking about the Eye and Neo devices I backed, we're going to be talking about these devices one after another, and I'm going to start with the Mini because they announced it first. So like I said earlier, this all started when Retroid posted a teaser of the Mini on their YouTube channel. It was an unknown device at the time, but we now know it as the Mini. And they did that typical thing of having it fly through the air so we can see what it looks like at all different angles. And I mean, it looks like a Retroid device. To be fully honest, the first thing I noticed that I actually took note of as I was watching the video was the grips on the back, because those are new for Retroid devices. All of their devices up to this point have been flat backed, and if they've sold rubber grips alongside them as add-ons if you want like actual grips to have for them. And I'm not sure if having them on the device itself is a good decision or not. The reason I can't tell if this is a good decision or not is because it takes away the choice we had as the consumers when it came to the grips. I know this is nitpicking, but hear me out. Grips would make the devices more comfortable, but having big grips or even small grips on the back takes away a little bit of portability. And especially on a small device like the Mini, what is going to be known as like a small device, they want pocketability to be a big selling factor. They want to have as much pocketability as possible. And I'm not saying they didn't think of that, I'm sure they did, but I will probably prefer having grips built into the device rather than having a rubber grip, because one, I don't like buying add-ons, and two, this will probably feel better than a rubber grip would. But I wanted to talk about it, I wanted to bring it to your attention because it's going to be an issue for somebody. Pocketability is really important for a lot of people who are buying these devices, and I'm sure someone's going to be upset about it. But moving on to more than just that, they have a spec sheet here we can look at. It says that the Pocket Mini will have a 3.7-inch AMOLED 4x3 display, which is cool. The screen is exactly 1 inch smaller than the Pocket 4's display, and I'm just confused on who's making these very specifically sized screens. Like, why 0.7? But the 4 and 4 Pro both use LCD displays compared to this device's AMOLED display, so the colors will most definitely look nicer. And don't worry, I have my Retroid Pocket 4 Pro to compare this to once it arrives. And my 2S. I, for some reason, when I first saw this device, thought that this was going to be Retroid's foray into making a device with a 1x1 screen, like the Ambernic RG Cube or whatever that Powkitty device was. And I think it would make sense because other companies have, but I mean, 4x3 and 16x9 are the standards, so it makes sense that they went with them. I just think if they were going to do something unique, 1x1 is kind of an inevitability. It looks like the joysticks are going to have an RGB ring around them, which is cool. I usually don't use RGB rings for that long around devices because I don't like having pulsing colors or like colors changing around. It looks too gamery for my liking. But if this device has an option to just set it to white or have it travel like the RG Cube did, travel along with the joystick in whatever direction I'm pointing at, I'll probably just keep it at that. Otherwise, I'm probably just gonna turn it off. It also looks like, based on the photos that they've posted of this device, that are obviously still renders, but I hope it looks this similar, that the controls are very slightly spaced out from each other. So they're not directly lined up, they're a little like tilted. And even if it's the slightest amount of tilt, I really do appreciate those kinds of designs because that's what made the Odin 2 Mini so nice to hold. I talked about this in my video about the Ioneo devices I backed and my Odin 2 Mini review, but I really love when a device has like controls that are like this instead of like this, especially if they don't have grips on the back, because it makes it so much more comfortable to hold. The Ioneo device that I pre-ordered that has that same like kind of V-shaped layout, but very slightly, is gonna have grips on the back. But the Odin 2 Mini, which I did a review on, doesn't have grips on the back. The sides are very rounded, which kind of allowed for the controls to be slightly spaced out. And I really appreciated that because that made it so much more comfortable to play and hold. I think it'll work well on here, especially with the grips on the back since we didn't have those with the Odin 2 Mini. But as with everything else, we'll just have to wait and see. The D-pad here looks like a typical Retroid D-pad. They've all kind of been the same throughout the years. Maybe they've refined it a little bit, but if you haven't liked them in the past, I don't think anything's gonna be changing here. Something else about the screen that I love that I forgot to mention earlier is that there's no bezels. It's completely flush with the rest of the display, which if you remember from my video about the Ioneo devices, I talked about how that's such a cool feature and I'm really excited for it because I don't really mind bezels on these devices. They don't piss me off that much, but it does kind of annoy me when I have like a gray device or a white device or something and then there's just a black border around the screen. It doesn't look that good. But the fact that these are all going to be flush with the display like they are with this device, like they are on the Ioneo devices, is going to be major. I'm glad to see bezels disappearing from these devices. I think it looks really nice when they don't have like very apparent bezels because that just kind of distracts. It doesn't distract at that much, but it's like very noticeable. It also has analog triggers, which are nice. I'm glad they're keeping them from the 2S and 4 and not going back to digital for the minis. There are 5 colors. They're all pretty cool. I'm not sure how I feel about these color rings on the outside of the devices, but I think they look nice for the most part. What's actually crazy is that 12 hours after they posted the colors for this thing, they took away an option and said that they refined the color options, which is crazy because they took away the one I wanted. There was one that was like red and white that kind of looked like the RGQ that I kind of wanted to get because I think it looks nice, and they took it away. But I mean, it's fine. But I do also like the red and black option, the SFC one, I think, and the orange, black, and gray one. And I chose the red and black option when I pre-ordered it anyway. I personally like it when there are more color options. Obviously, give the consumer more choice. It's a better thing than taking away choice. But if no one else was going to buy that red and white one besides me, I understand why they took it away. I'll talk about the processor again when we get to the Pocket 5 because both devices use the Snapdragon 865 chip. But if this video from ATA Prime shows us anything, it's that this thing can be really promising in terms of emulation. The same is actually true about the GPU too. They both use the Adreno 650 GPU, but what's different is the battery and RAM amounts. The Mini has a 4,000 mAh battery, smaller than the Pocket 4, but the same amount as the Pocket 2S. And it has 6 GB of RAM, which is 2 or 3 more than the Pocket 2S, but 2 less than the 4 Pro and 5. The rest of the specs are what you'd expect. The rest of the specs that I didn't talk about and the dimensions aren't too different from the Retroid Pocket 2S, seeing as they compared the two in a tweet and seem to be using it as a successor, or at least selling it alongside the 2S, seeing as it's over $100 more. Yeah, $200 is expensive for a mini device. I do think it's a little excusable though, because they do still sell the 2S straight from them on their website at its base price, which I think is great. You can still get it from them for like $80 or $100, which is great. It would be a bigger deal if they didn't sell it anymore, but because you can still get it from them officially and get it shipped to you, I think the price is kind of excusable. I do think that's kind of expensive for a mini device, but for what you're getting, and because they're still selling the other device, I think it's okay. But yeah, I'm really excited about this device. The design looks really interesting, and I'm very interested in seeing how it compares to the other mini device I'm supposed to be getting this month, the Ioneo Pocket Micro. I will obviously also be comparing this thing to the Pocket 2S because that's what it's closest to size-wise, but I think I'm also going to compare it to the 4 Pro that I have, just because I think it might be close power-wise. So there's a chance that this thing might be a jack of all trades. I don't want to get my expectations too high though, because I know that Retroid can let me down, even though they haven't recently, but there have been times where there have been duds when I think there's going to be diamonds. Moving on to the Pocket 5, this was another surprise announcement that everybody knows I'm a big fan of. I'm not. Do I wish they waited a little longer to announce the 5 so they didn't do it in the middle of the Mini's hype cycle? Yes, but it's kind of okay because they said on Twitter that the Pocket Mini is going to be shipping at the end of September, while the Pocket 5 is going to be shipping at the end of October. So while I don't like that they were announced at the same time or even that they went on pre-order at the same time, I do like that they're shipping at different times so I don't have to choose between the two to cover first. So this device, we don't have to guess on what it's a successor to. It's very obviously a successor to the 4 and 4 Pro, but curiously enough, there's no Pro model. All the Pro model really did was give a bit of a spec bump to the 4, most notable of them being the extra RAM and better processor. But the Pocket 5 has a better processor than both of them, and 8 GB of RAM is the standard, which I think alleviates the need for a Pro model, because that would just make this more expensive than it needs to be. But if we're gonna trust Retroid on this, the 5 is not gonna be that much bigger than the 4 Pro, or at least in terms of size. What it is gonna be though is thicker, because as I'm sure you're aware, this thing also has grips on the back. I think that's good. I understand that people want small devices, they want flat-backed devices for pocketability, but for a device that's already kind of like their main product, I think it's okay. If you want a pocketable device, get the 2S or the Mini. I think for this device at least, 2 bumps on the back never hurt anybody. The roundedness of this device is probably going to work in a similar way to benefit it like the Pocket Mini and the Odin 2 Mini, but with the same benefit as the Pocket Mini, the big grips on the back. I personally am very glad they put grips on the back of this thing, because while I loved my Retroid Pocket 4 Pro, playing it for long periods of time with my fingers flat against the back was not the most comfortable experience. And I didn't buy the grip, so I didn't have an alternative. But yeah, I can see why people wouldn't want big grips on the back, because they might take away from the pocketability, but they don't look too big, so it might not take away that much. We'll just have to wait and see though. Especially you've got man pockets. They should fit. I do like the design, but I'm not sure there's much more I can really add, because a lot of the things on this device are very similar to the ones on the Mini, like the LEDs around the joystick, the bezel-less display, the rounded sides, the grips on the back, and the front-facing speakers I forgot to talk about last time. This is something I'm very excited for, because the 4 and 4 Pro had almost backwards-facing speakers, which I didn't love, but this thing has speakers on the front, which I do love. Hopefully they sound good. I think the ones on the 4 and 4 Pro sounded fine, or like even good, but they had to push against my palms and project from there, which I think muffled it a little bit. Also, like on the Mini, the controls look like they're very slightly spaced apart from each other, which I hope makes them more comfortable to use, but obviously, like for everything else, we're gonna have to wait and see. But yeah, the design is nice. I'm excited to see how it plays in the hand. This device comes in 4 colors, and they're all kind of basic except for the GameCube option, which I pre-ordered. Basic doesn't mean bad. I think all the colors look really nice. I just think they're kind of bland. The GameCube option looks really cool though. I'm glad they colored all of the controls to match the GameCube's controls. And obviously the purple on the outside is very nostalgic for the OG GameCube. I think I like the variety in the Mini's colors better, but these are all great choices. I'm sure they'll all look good in the hand. Moving on to the specs, this thing, like I previously said, has the same processor and GPU as the Mini. I think this is good. Trying to not have too big of a power difference between the devices, especially since they are so close in price, is good. What is different though is the screen. The Pocket 5 has a 5.5-inch 1080p AMOLED display, which if I'm not mistaken, is the biggest screen ever in a Retroid device. The battery is 5,000 milliamp hours, it has 8 GB of RAM, and it runs on Android 13 instead of Android 10 like the Mini. It's $219, which is $20 more than the Mini, and I'm not really sure right now which I think is the better value, but it's nice to know that they're not too different in most categories. The specs here aren't too different from the Mini. Obviously, it's all a bit stepped up to make this thing a better buy, to make it worth getting over the Mini, but I am glad both of them exist. I feel like they serve different purposes, but being able to play a similar library of games or the exact same library of games is only a good thing. I feel like though I do have less stuff to say about the 5 than the Mini, only because we knew that this would be happening eventually. And a lot of the interesting stuff in both of these devices I already talked about with the Mini. So it's like I'd just be repeating myself. I am very excited though, and I think this is all I really have to say regarding all of this currently released information. So let's wrap this all up. So I'm excited about both of these devices. I feel like I'm looking at them in a similar way that I am the Eye Neo devices that I pre-ordered. They're obviously not the same, but I'm looking at them in similar ways. The Pocket Micro is like the Mini and the Pocket Evo is like the 5. Not saying that they're alike even in how I'm going to use them, but I think it's similar. I obviously don't know yet because I don't have either of the devices, but I feel like the Pocket Mini is what I'm going to recommend for pure emulation if you want like a mini emulator. Well, the 5 is what I recommend for emulation and Android gaming. Seeing as it has Android 13 over Android 10 on the Mini, which makes it obviously more powerful and able to play newer games. And it also has that nice 16:9 display compared to the 4:3 that obviously works better with retro emulation. I pre-ordered them the minute they went live. They have a discount price for anyone who wanted to order both of them, which was really nice. Hopefully I get these devices as soon as they start shipping, but I'm no stranger to getting devices 2 months after everybody else and still reviewing it. But that's enough from me. What do you guys think of these two devices? Did you pre-order either of them? Is there one you pre-ordered of the other? Did you pre-order neither of them? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you next week. Maybe, if I have a video. Bye-bye. I can't reach that far.